Hello everybody and welcome to the fourth in this series of videos looking at how to use Excel to analyse data. In this particular video what we're going to do is we're going to look at how to use a pivot table to produce a single variable graph. So as with the previous video I have already produced a pre-populated set of data to use. So first things first, why use a pivot table? Well, a pivot table is a little bit more flexible and it can do things with larger data sets far quicker than you perhaps would be able to using the countif function. The countif function is fine, it does the job perfectly well. It's just that sometimes you might feel that using a pivot table would be better, be more efficient, that sort of thing. So let's have a quick look at my data before we actually move on to actually produce the graph. What I've got here basically is the sort of thing that you might expect to see coming out of a questionnaire that had been filled in online or maybe filled in by people and then put online or put into a database. I have 4 fields in columns A through to D, and I have 28 separate answers to my questionnaire. Column A is all about the name of the person, could be the name of the student, for example. Question 1 is the age. Quite obvious what that actually is. When you look at it, you can see that it's got 18, 20, 19, 18. So these could very well be the age of ordinary people. Question 2 and question 3, it's a little bit of a different matter though. Question 2, we've got gender. Question 3, confident using Excel. Are you confident using Excel to produce graphs, for example? And when we look at the data that we've got in those columns, it's all basically numbers, 1s and 2s, with the occasional 3. So that could give us a little bit of a problem because it's meaningless as it is. When you set up a questionnaire, what you really need to do is make a record of what you set things up as, so that when you look at the data like this, you can actually understand what you're seeing, i.e. produce a codebook. So I've produced a codebook when I set this little test data up, and here it is. So on the left hand side, quite simply, I've got a list of my questions. Question 1, age, actual age, meaning actual age. So pretty straightforward. Question 2 on gender. In the data field, or data column, I've got 1, 2 and 3. These are the answers that you actually see if we look at the spreadsheet down here. 1, 2, there's a couple of 3s down here, and so on and so forth. So what do they mean? 1 means male, 2 means female, 3 means declined to answer the question. So we can see from this, we're beginning to make sense of the data. We can see that we've got some males, we can see that we've got some females, and we can see that we've got some people that actually decided they didn't want to answer that particular question, which of course is within their rights to do. Question 3, confidence using Excel. So here we've got 3 choices. We've got 1, 2 and 3, and if we look on the right hand side we can see that 1 means confident, 2 means neither confident nor unconfident, and 3 means unconfident. So we can now see what this data actually means, and it's beginning to mean a little bit more to us. But obviously if you had several hundred responses to this questionnaire with maybe a couple of dozen more questions, it's going to be very difficult. It's just going to be a mass of numbers. So this really is where visualizing the data, separating it out to actually look at it and to try and give it some meaning really comes into its own. So how do we start producing the graph? Well, the first stage basically is just to select all the data that we want to use in our pivot table. So if we look up here between the A and the 1, we've got this little triangle right in the corner here. If you left click on that, it selects all of the data. And that's what we're basically going to do for this. We're going to select all of the data like that, then we're going to go up to the Insert tab on the top bar there, click on that, and then over on the left here we see Pivot Table, and if we click on that we get this little dialog box come up. Now the first question on the dialog box asks us if we asks us for our table or our range of data that we want to use. We've already done that by pre-selecting the data before we clicked on the pivot table button, so we don't need to do anything with that. But if you do wish to perhaps manipulate it, change it, that's where you do it. The second option that it gives us is choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. Now we have got a lot of space in this particular worksheet, but as I said earlier, it may well be that you have a lot more questions, so there might not be space. I often therefore find that it's easiest just to accept the default and put it onto a new worksheet. At least then you can see it and you know exactly what you're working with. So I'm just going to click on OK, and it opens up a new worksheet and puts the pivot table there. So just to explain that, if you look down at the bottom left, we've now got two tabs down here at the bottom left. Sheet 2, which is where our pivot table is, and Sheet 1, which is where our data is. You can rename this by moving the cursor over that, right clicking, moving up and just selecting rename, and I'm just going to rename that data. Then I'm going to click on Sheet 2, right click, rename, and I'm just going to call it pivot table, just so that we know where we are. So there's our pivot table. Now we've just got to produce it. Now I mentioned that we've got 3 columns there, and the one that we're going to be interested in for this first video using pivot tables is going to be the age. What I would like to know is how many people we've got in each of the different ages. So how many people have we got who are 18, how many people who are 19, 20, and so on and so forth. So question 1 over on the right hand side in the pivot table fields dialog box is what we want, age. You could just tick this. If we tick this, you'll see that it drops some of question 1 age down there. Not really what we want, so not useful. Sometimes you get lucky and it provides you with exactly what you want. So I'm going to untick that. I'm going to left click while I'm over it so that it stays on the green, and then I'm just literally going to drag it down here into the rows. And as you see over on the left, what it's then done is it's then produced a load of rows with the different options in it, 18, 19, 20, 21, 35. So that basically has saved us going through the COUNTIF function and then putting in COUNTIF 18, COUNTIF 19, COUNTIF 20, so on and so forth. So if you've got a lot of data with a lot of different ages, that could save you a lot of work. So that's part of the way there. Now, the next thing that we have to do is actually get in there how many people are of each age. How many people have said they are 18? How many people have said they are 19? So we go back over to the right-hand side, left-click on the question 1 for age again, and then we drop it down to the bottom right-hand box there, values, and release it. Now that's come up and given us the sum of question 1. In other words, what it's actually done is it's actually added up all the different values, which is not really what we want. What we want is the count of all the different values. So you see here on the right hand side down at the bottom right in that box, that values box that we've just dropped question 1 into, it's got this little down arrow. So if we click on that, we've got a value field settings there as the first option at the bottom of that little dialog menu. If we click on that, it brings this dialog box up, and you can see that the second option here is count. There are other options, but we want the count, and we're just going to click on OK, and you'll see now that it's actually produced the number of people who have answered to each different age. 6 people 18, 10 people 19, 20 people, sorry, 8 people is 20, 3 people is 21, and 1 person 35. And we have a grand total of 28 people, which is how many people were on our data sheet when we actually answered. We've got name up at the top and hands is the last one down there. So that's the data that we need to actually produce the graph. So let's get on and do that now. Personally, I find it easier to actually take the data out of the pivot table by copying and pasting it into another part of the spreadsheet. So right click and copy, then come over here to the right hand side somewhere, right click and paste, and you can either just paste or use the paste values. You'll notice that the pivot table dialog box on the right has disappeared. If you want to bring it back up, just come over here on the left hand side and just click on any part of the actual pivot table there, and you'll get the dialog box back up. So anyway, I'm going to go back to working on the data now. Here's my data. I've got my 18, 19, 20 down here. I've got the number of people here. So that's pretty meaningless on its own. So I'm just going to pop in a couple of headings, age, and then number of students. It'd be good if I could actually get the spelling right. I'm typing a little bit too fast. There we go. And now literally it's just a case of highlighting all of that and then going to the Insert tab and then clicking on Recommended Charts. And just the same as we looked at last time, you get a choice between what's been recommended to you, and there's all sorts of different charts, or you can go into all charts and you can, choose whichever chart you want, 3D chart, for example. Um, and that one might be quite nice, but personally I'm just going to go with what's recommended, and I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to choose that clustered column chart and click on OK. That then gives me the chart, quite a nice straightforward chart, but the heading isn't quite right, is it? Number of students, that's not quite what I want. So it's actually the age of students that this chart shows. So I'm just going to click on the title there, and I'm just going to highlight number, and I'm going to change it to age. I think I could possibly do also with some axis titles in, so going to click on the green cross here, which allows me to add and remove different chart elements, grid lines, legends, all sorts of things here. So I'm just going to click on axis titles, and I'm going to start off by putting number of students in the vertical axis over here. A little bit difficult because it is typing in vertically, which does throw you off a little bit the first time that you do it, but you get used to it. Number of students, and then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to change this one to age of students. Nearly there. There we go, just get my spelling right. So beginning to look a little bit better. You might decide that you want to change the style of the graph, that one or maybe that one. I'm going to go for that one. And you might decide you could even change the elements. You can change the colors, for example, by clicking on the individual bars and then just clicking on this and just choosing a color. I could choose that color there, go to this bar, let's choose a different color from there. We could maybe have yellow. It really is up to you what you do. So have a look over this, see what you can actually do with it, and just take it from there, really. That's what I would suggest. Let's have green for that one, and we'll leave that last one there as blue. Now, when you actually look at this chart, we have got this one outlier here, somebody saying they're 35 years old. If we look back here, it's actually Adam saying he's 35 years old. I'm not so sure that Adam's telling the truth, but there we go. 35. Well, we don't really want to know about outliers in this case. We're more interested in the main body of people in the group here. There has to be a reason, but you can, if you want to, go on the funnel and just uncheck the 35, and then the 35 will be removed from the graph when you click on apply, and that's what I've done there, which basically shows you now our spread of students. But I would just say I would emphasise this point, you do need a valid reason to exclude any of your data, and I'd certainly mention somewhere that is what you have actually done if you choose to exclude some of the data. Anyway, that is it for this video. So once again, I will place the initial starting spreadsheet into Blackboard. So if you could work through it, copying what I've done so that you can understand it and so you get a little bit of practice, I'd be grateful. Thank you very much. See you next time.